Welcome to Down to Dunk. I'm your host, Andrew Schleck. We're part of the Athletic Podcast Network. This is the Thunder Draft Bonanza podcast that I've been promising you guys all week. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to it. Most of these were recorded before the Alex Caruso trade, so be aware of that as you go into it. I did have a conversation with Sam Vecenie that discussed the trade and then the draft. So that's there, but then I have great conversations with Krysten and Tate Frazier and Mann, Tyler Metcalf, Nathan Grubel, Boone. Very grateful to everybody who came on. I thought that it would be fun to get a wide variety of people from across the country to talk about the Thunder and talk about the draft. So would very much appreciate you guys sharing this, whether it's a YouTube video or if this is via the podcast. Would love for you guys to share it. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll have more episodes of Down to Dunk as scheduled next week, so look out for that. And I hope to see you guys all at the Jones Assembly in downtown OKC the night of the draft. We are having a Down to Dunk draft party at the Jones Assembly. Be there. I get there 6:30-ish, 6 to set up for the draft. It's going to be a great time. You want to be there. You don't want to be at home watching the draft. So come to the Down to Dunk draft party. We'd love to have you. Without further ado, here is the Down to Dunk NBA Draft Bonanza. All right, with me to talk about the draft and about this Alex Caruso trade is my favorite draft and analyzer. He's just the best. We've been trying to schedule this for a while, and it actually just worked out so well that we're recording today and not even 3 hours earlier or whenever I was trying to make it happen. This just worked out beautifully because the Thunder traded for Alex Caruso, traded Josh Giddey just straight up for him. First, let me get your reaction of that, and then we can talk about how it maybe affects the draft.
Okay, so my immediate reaction was, I am somewhat surprised that Josh Giddey returned this much value. Yeah. You tweeted this, and we've been talking a bit offline, but how do I want to phrase this? I had kind of been told that the Josh Giddey era in Oklahoma City was in all likelihood coming to an end.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with any of the off-court allegations or whatever we want to. I want to just be clear about that. They really like Josh in Oklahoma City. It has nothing to do with that. It really is just a matter of they're going to have to pay this guy a lot of money, and he might not fit on the roster long-term because he's a guy that is going to have real problems if he can't play on the ball, which for Oklahoma City, you have Jalen Williams, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you have Cason Wallace, who I think they hope can develop into that long-term as a guy that can at least be an option on the ball. And on top of it, you also get Alex Caruso in this deal, right? So it just wasn't a long-term fit at the end of the day. And because they like Josh Giddey and are still big fans of him, I've reached out to people in the front office. They're very clear that they are big fans of Josh Giddey. It's just that it was the right time for a change at the end of the day, I think is the fairest way to put it.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right. And I think Caruso's a player that I think, and I've said this on this show already, but I just think a low usage role player that shoots threes is just exactly what you need for this crew. And he can handle a little bit too. He's not some just standstill only 3-point shooter. He's a guy that can function within this offense, and a guy that the Thunder have liked for a long time. He played for the Blue. He's played under Mark Daigneault before. There's an affinity there that has existed for a long time. And I think that it's fair to say the Thunder are actually pretty lucky that he was even available at this point, and lucky that obviously the Bulls had a high grade on Josh Giddey, because in order to swap these two, they had to have had a very high opinion and not have been shaken by the way he played this season, to be able to complete a deal like that.
My guess, so I've talked to a lot of people league wide at this point on what exactly is Alex Caruso's value? Because, obviously he's been a potential trade option now for multiple years
Yeah.
because nobody except the Bulls realized that the Bulls were not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it seems now they might be kind of figuring that out. Uh, the impression I have gotten was something like a mid first rounder and a second rounder, like a good non lottery first round pick plus a second, or like, maybe a couple of seconds or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's like a pretty reasonable approximation of the value here is for Josh,
Okay.
right? Like if we're thinking about it like in draft capital terms, right? Like, I don't know this. This is not intel saying that the 76ers offered this deal, but the 76ers have 16 and, seconds that they could have offered for this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if I'm the 76ers, I'm like, holy shit, Alex Caruso is the perfect guy to put next to Tyrese Maxey,
Yeah.
right? And he's cheap. He doesn't really impact their cap space in a significant way. Like I would be trying to move heaven and earth to be able to
Yeah.
do that kind of deal, right? So essentially, like you can look at this as a slightly better value, in my opinion, than like number 16 and second round picks in this
Mm-hmm.
draft, is the way I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like that's really, I think that's good value for Josh. And I think Caruso fits like a glove with Oklahoma City, and we can talk now about like now where the draft is in less than a week. They now have Alex Caruso. You have Dort, Caruso, Case and Wallace as like this like trio of just insane defenders, defend a multiple position. Um, the competitive nature of those three just is off the charts. But there's a lot of good guards in this draft, and there's a lot of guards that are going to go in this 12 range. And now my question is like, how much does this affect what the Thunder do at the draft? And my guess is that it affects it quite a bit. Um,
Yeah.
I think you look at forward. I think you look at the big position. I think there's a real lane for both positions to get real minutes on this team next year. Now, do they want to give that to the 12th pick? It probably depends on who it is. But when you're now evaluating the situation, I know that you've been a big Bub Carrington to the Thunder guy. I was ready for the Bub and Dub era. I was ready to soak that in. Now it seems like we are not heading toward the Bub Dub time. Um, just thoughts on like how this affects the draft in general.
I know that you have kids because like the Bubba Dub time sounds like something that you would say to like your child for bath time, right? Uh
Oh, such a dad over here. Wow.
yeah. Uh so yeah, look, I've gotten like a lot of names connected with the Thunder,
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, because it's the Thunder, and like it's almost like one of those situations where like I don't even know if it's worth saying the names that I've had connected with the Thunder because I have gotten a few of them, and it's just like, well, this is probably all bullshit. And I know that the Thunder have like kind of let things leak out draft wise before, but I think over the last few years they've like really cleaned it up a little bit in terms of that regard. Um, and I've gotten so many names where like it's just like kind of ridiculous, I think, on some level to just like list off a bunch of names. So if we're looking at the guard position, hypothetically, you know, Jared McCain ticks a lot of boxes for them off the court in terms of work ethic, in terms of character, shooting, super high level worker, like awesome dude. Bub Carrington, processing, positional size, length, everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they're like expecting this guy that they draft to come in and play. So like I wouldn't
Yeah.
rule those guys
Yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously having Case and Wallace still, and I know that they want to hopefully make a long-term commitment to Alex Caruso, seemingly,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a little bit weird for them to take them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I could think of when it comes to like guards is that Bub has already said that he'd be willing to play in the G League if a team needed him to.
Yeah.
And so like maybe he's a guy that they're just like, we love the high upside of this guy. We think that
Yeah.
given a year or two of seasoning, like he could become something really good. And maybe we can't keep Isaiah Joe. Maybe we can't keep Aaron Wiggins. Maybe we can't keep
Yeah.
everybody in tow, because My guess is that they're looking to extend Caruso and probably wanting to do it relatively soon. And so that complicates things to a degree for guys like Isaiah and for Wiggins. And so that's just something I'm putting a pin in that I think it's unlikely they take a guard next Wednesday. But to say that that's off the table, I think is probably not true.
I think that's right too. I think I would be surprised if it's off the table. But they could look in a few different directions, right?
Yeah.
I think Tristan da Silva is an interesting name for them if
Yeah.
they decide to move on or think that they may have to financially move on from Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins.
Yeah.
Silva is a 6'9" wing who can really dribble, pass, shoot. I'll have a film room with him at some point next week on my
Nice.
YouTube channel. You'll be able to kind of watch and see the way that he thinks about the game.
Yeah.
Down at a high level. I'm really a big fan. I think that he's just like really sharp. I know people will look at the age and think, a little bit older of a player. Does he fit the Thunder? I don't know. Like, I think they're moving into such a different era now that, they might try and go for a guy that they think might be able to help. I've long been a fan of Kyle Filipowski to them because I like the idea of them just continuing to go all in on the dribble, pass, shoot guys that can, play the center position. And it's hard to find bigs who can do all three of those things.
Yeah.
Like Khalil Ware gets pigeonholed as like a modern big. And I'm just looking at my like eyes and face now, by the way, on this video because I don't have lighting on. And I'm like, holy shit, my body just looks like it's dead right now and tired. So Kyle Filipowski, like, is actually a dribble, pass, shoot big. Like he can do all of them. Khalil Ware is like so theoretical across the board, even with like the shot, in my opinion. I think he'll probably like be able to step away and shoot a little bit, but like he can't dribble and he definitely can't pass. So, doesn't totally like tick all of those boxes there. Deron Holmes is like, kind of a dribble pass shoot big, but like he's kind of more of what they have already in Jalen Williams is like an undersized ish big.
Okay.
Maybe they could just decide to go for it and just like, damn the rankings and everything. But that's a fit, at least like talent wise. I'm trying to think like any other. Well, like we have to talk about Salon, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the main name that really stands out. If he gets there, I think I would be like a little bit surprised if they didn't take him.
Yeah.
Not because of intel or anything, just because sorry, I got a phone call. I had to like hit the mute button. I think I'd be surprised if they didn't take him just because he ticks all of their boxes. This doesn't come from intel. It doesn't come from like me, knowing what they're thinking or anything. He just ticks everything that they look for. Like he's 9 foot plus standing reach, 6'9" without shoes, 7'2" wingspan, awesome basketball character. Like I've been told like really good kid too, but like you watch him on the court, the motor is just crazy. Like he plays so hard all the time. He just like it'd be a really good fit with Chet Holmgren. I think he has potential to shoot it. He's not super explosive. Like I think that's like kind of the misnomer about his game. Like he's just like this big, strong framed dude that is like more fluid than anything. But like not like bouncy, like getting up the ground or anything. I like he just ticks so many of their boxes where if he got there, and I don't think he'll get there as of right now, but like chance, definitely a chance. If he got there, man, like it'd be weird for me to like not see them take him.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think, okay, they should be done with upside swings. But this is the lottery, and this is the Thunder, and I just have a hard time believing that they think, okay, we just need to find a 23-year-old to bring in now. Like this is a chance to still change things for your future, and get a guy that's cheap. And so if Salon takes if he takes a couple years and he's really good in a couple years, man, like draft pick well spent, and even if he doesn't
Yeah.
hit, like the Thunder have a good enough team to where they're not counting on this pick to hit. So I would be surprised if they didn't take him too. A name that I've heard a few times is Keyshawn George, and I just want to know your thoughts on Keyshawn for OKC.
Oh God. I'm not a huge fan, to be
Okay.
honest. I
Okay.
get it. Like I do understand it. And if you are interested in Keyshawn George, like I do get it. I think
Yeah.
that he's an interesting player. What I ultimately like really struggled to get over with Keyshawn is the fact that, I know he's gone through like a late growth spurt. I know that,
Mhm.
he's really like, still developing in a lot of ways, quite skinny, not super explosive yet, like very, very much not an athlete at all right now. And that could be because he's growing into his frame, but like it also could just be that he doesn't have like that pop, right?
Mhm.
I struggled to get past the fact that this is a guy that averaged 3 points per game in the French second division last year, which is
Yeah.
like not a particularly strong uh league overseas,
Mhm.
in terms of imports, in terms of everything. And then came over here, played for a Miami team. This Miami team was like dreadful. Whenever they started to give him the ball more later in the year, they actually got worse. They lost like their last 10 games of the
Mm.
year.
Yeah.
And he's not like super young. Like he is he turns 21 in December.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not a
20 and a half
situation.
freshman. Yeah, he's not some 18-year-old or 19-year-old guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just couldn't quite get there on the production side, and I couldn't get there on the athleticism side. Look like, dribble pass shoot wing, obviously. Like that ticks a lot of the Thunder's boxes in terms of what they look for. It
Mhm.
wouldn't stun me if they took him. I personally just couldn't quite get there. And that's not to say I think he's like definitely going to be a bad player. It's just not a bet that I would have made, is maybe the way, or that it's not a bet that I would make at the likely position where he is to get drafted, is probably the
Mhm.
fairest way to state it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And to me, if you're the Thunder, I would probably look big or at a bigger wing. Like I like De Silva. I think he checks some of the shoot pass dribble stuff for the Thunder too. He's just older. The Thunder have never drafted a guy who was 22 or older in the lottery. They just have never done it. And so
Yeah.
I don't really I find it I have a hard time thinking that they would do it this year. Now, every draft is different, every player is different. So you can't just put that in a box and say like this is what it is. Like they could have loved De Silva and think that he fits
Yeah.
exactly what they need. I think that's totally possible. I wonder about Cody Williams. I wonder if he is available at 12. It's seeming like more unlikely that he's there at 12. What are your thoughts on him and just his positioning as we're like a week out or so?
Yeah. So he ended up at number 6 for me
Okay.
personally.
Yeah.
And my impression is that I would be surprised if he's there at 12.
Okay.
But like, another potential dribble pass shoot wing, obviously Jalen's brother, very different games. Like Cody's a little bit thinner and, still developing into his frame, has that same length that Jalen has, obviously, but, definitely still developing in terms of what his game will be long term. Not as much of like a, you know, guy's going to come in immediately and like take over the world,
Mm,
but good character, unsurprisingly, like works hard given that he's Jalen's brother. Like there's a lot of reasons to buy into him as being like a good two-way, long-term wing project prospect kind of thing. I think he understands like he needs to work on the shot, understands that, needs to continue growing into his frame in a real way. But look, if he was there, like take him for
yeah.
God's sake, Oklahoma City, take him. But um, yeah, I think I'd be surprised if he was there.
Yeah. I would as well. Now, as these guys are rising, Saloon's rising. Who's falling? Like somebody's falling to 12. I just don't know if it's somebody the Thunder would want. Like, is a Ron Holland falling, and is that somebody you'd be interested in as the Thunder? Who is falling?
Yeah, yeah, like Holland is the name,
Yeah,
right? I think there's more of a chance that Holland is there. I don't think it's certain that Holland is there at 12 by
yeah,
any stretch.
sure.
Uh, but like, I think there's more of a chance that Ron ends up there
Mhm.
than Cody Williams, right? Like, I think Cody probably goes ahead of Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, complicated. So, from what I understand, has not had a particularly great pre-draft process in terms of like didn't have a great pro day, hasn't really gone in and like shot super well at workouts,
Mm.
right? Um, no, the shot like needs substantial work. I don't really love the mechanics. I think it's going to take a lot of time, and we'll see if he gets there on
Yeah.
it, right?
Hmm.
He is so competitive, man. Like, I ended up with it. Like, I have him higher than where the Thunder are picking on my personal board.
Mm-hmm.
He's so competitive, and like he's been a winner like throughout his career up until this point, like with the Ignite, right? I think this Ignite team just put like such a stink on these kids. Like they that team was so dreadfully just like disastrous this year, and
Yeah.
it wasn't their fault. Like they were
Yeah.
just put into such a shitty spot. Like, would the Thunder take him?
It feels like, I
I
mean,
don't
I would
know.
be
It
surprised.
doesn't feel thundery to
No, he
me because
doesn't.
of like the
He just
lack of dribble pass shoot.
I know. He hasn't felt thundery the whole time for me. He feels like a rocket. Honestly, he feels like a total rocket. You know.
He feels like what people think the Rockets are,
Yeah.
I think, but
Okay.
not what they actually are. Maybe like, I think like if you look at the Rockets' history of like drafting, they've been really good, right? But like they've hit on all of like Amen Thompson. I think Jabari Smith is a hit. Like he had a really
Oh
good year
yeah.
this year as like a
Oh
20-year-old. Um, Tari Eason is a big hit, like in the middle of the first round, and you know, we'll see what Jalen Green is, obviously, but has some upside still, and like they've done well in the draft, I think, and I think that like people look at them as like the all athlete, no skill. Cam Whitmore, obviously, another one that like ticks that box, but
yeah.
I think that they are much more discerning than what people think in
Mm.
terms of that, and like with Rocket guy, like I think people have this like old impression of like Daryl Morey, where like Daryl Morey just like doesn't care as much about the intel stuff,
Yeah.
and
It's more like BPA. Like they have gone for like BPA a lot.
yeah,
It's worked a lot of times.
yeah, that's right, and they tend to draft young for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, best like young player available,
Yeah.
kind of is if that's a good way to phrase the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I do think they're like fairly discerning. Like they're not like the Thunder, where like they're trying to build like for a specific like type of thing, in my opinion, yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this offseason kind of proves that proves that they are. But I think when it comes to the draft, like I think their team of scouts is like pretty strong, I guess
Oh
is
yeah.
what I would say. But like,
Yeah.
Sacramento, I think could make an immense amount of sense for Ron Holland, especially if they like try and do a deal for Zach LaVine or
Mm.
something like that. And they end up keeping 13. You could try and replace Harrison Barnes with Ron Holland, because Barnes would have to go the other way just to match salaries on LaVine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the Heat, like you could look at the Heat, like taking a flyer on Ron Holland, like his competitiveness would like really fit in with like their whole culture and
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
Like I think when we say that like someone isn't like a thundery player, people might get the wrong idea about like the kid and like the character.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
You know
No, no,
what I
no.
mean?
I've been trying to say that, and I've been trying to get this across too. Is like just because they're not a thundery guy doesn't mean they're a bad person or a bad player.
Yeah.
You know, like I think people think that when I say that, they mean that they're not good. Like there are going to be a ton of players, and there already have been a ton of players that are really good that the Thunder are going to pass on because they don't necessarily fit what they're trying to do. And that doesn't mean they're bad basketball players or bad people. Like it's not,
Totally.
yeah, not a fair way to characterize it. Even though the players the Thunder are trying to get are very skilled and very good people. Like it doesn't mean that
Yep.
they're the exact opposite of that, you know. Anyways, I got to let you go here, but I want you to just tell me now that the Thunder have Alex Caruso in place,
Yeah.
who would you go with if you're the Thunder, or who are you hoping is there at 12 on draft night?
Salon. I would hope Salon is there.
Okay. And if
And
no Salon,
really, if no Salon, Oh man, if no Salon, look, I might just take Jared McCain at the end of the day.
I love that answer. I mean that
Like I might just like take Bub Carrington or Jared McCain and
yeah,
just say like screw it. Like that's what I prefer.
yeah,
And I think it's the best player on the board, and I would just do it.
yeah,
But if they decide they're looking forward, and Salon isn't there,
mm-hmm.
look, it'd be either Filipowski or De Silva for
Yeah,
me. But
yeah,
I understand not going with either of those guys based on age or whatever.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Go listen to Game Theory. Go subscribe on their YouTube page, and read Sam Vecenie at The Athletic, which you already are because he's fantastic and like it's really the only mock draft that I really care about. So, Sam, thanks so much for coming on.
Of course, Andrew, anytime.
I've got Tate Frazier from The Ringer with me to break down this draft and specifically for the Thunder. Tate, how's it going?
It's going well. It's great to be on the show with you, and it's a fun team to talk about. Anytime anyone asks me about the Thunder, I'm like, I kind of perk up a little bit. So appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm excited to try to break it down. The Thunder, they keep it tight there, so nobody really knows.
I actually find it to be a little bit fun because not knowing, just like it's like a weird puzzle of like, okay, what are they thinking? What do you think? Do they still want upside? Do they not want upside? Do they want a guy that's ready? Do they want, Saloon or Salon or however you say it? Like I don't know. I have no idea. But if you're the Thunder, you're sitting at 12, who do you hope is there on draft night?
I think that's a great question. I do feel like I woke up the other morning 2 days ago and I just kind of mocked out the whole draft. Like, what would I do? How would things play out? And I got to the Thunder at number 12. And the name that came up and I put down was Bub Carrington. And I do feel like the Bub Carrington push is happening in real time. He gets the green room invite. And I call this the Presti zone. I know Bill Simmons invented the Tyson zone. I call this the Presti zone because this is where he thrives. And no matter who the Thunder pick here, they are going to get, rave reviews. And, let's say they throw a crazy name out there, like a Zach Edey. If they took Zach Edey at 12, the response would be, wow, what does Presti know that we don't know? How did we miss this? And if you were to take someone like Bub Carrington, we'd all be hearing about the upside. I do wonder about Wallace being there. They got him last year at number 10 with that trade with Dallas. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're kind of redundant, but I do think Bub Carrington is very interesting. And a lot of people, kind of that I've discussed and talked to, they don't know what the Thunder are doing, but they say this guy's moving up quickly and it would make sense for Presti to make that move.
Listen, you don't have to sell me on the Bub and Dub era in Oklahoma City.
I like it.
Yeah, I think he's really interesting, especially if they decide to move on from Josh Giddey this summer. I think adding another big point guard would really help. And even if they do keep him and they decide to start Giddey, I think they could really use more passing and ball handling off the bench. I think they have guards that are like really good role players, but they need somebody to help them. They need somebody to help accentuate what they do, and that's. Carrington can really pass. Like his live dribble passing skill is really something.
Yeah, and he was given the keys at Pittsburgh. Capel is a really good coach at guards. And, if you watch the tape on Bub Carrington, it really pops. And I do feel like the more that these teams started getting information on guys and the more that kind of words started spreading around, everyone's like, why is this guy not a lottery pick? And the Thunder seem to have a proclivity to find these guys, you know what I mean? That you look around and you're saying, well, how did you miss on Jalen? J-Dub, as you were just talking about. So it feels like the right zone, the right area, the Presti zone. And it would be a great pick. But I know some people want a big, but I think they get a big that's more of a veteran big, and then they get a guard that has some upside like Bub.
Yeah. Let's talk about some wing options, because I do think there's a lane for another wing on this team, especially if they're in like the 6'9", 6'10" range. So rank these three guys and tell me who you think the Thunder should want the most.
Okay, I'm ready.
Saloon. How do you say Saloon's name? That's another poll that I'm giving people.
I say Salon, and I think that is correct. Some people have been calling me Tate Frazier because how much I love this man. I think I have him number one on my board because of how much I love the tape, and I also love the Wimby connection. I don't think he's going to be there at number 12, to be quite frank. But I think it's Tajane Salon. And the first name could be pronounced how you see fit, and everything's up for interpretation. But I like Salon.
Yeah, Cody Williams or Tristan da Silva. So rank those three, and who do you like the most for OKC?
I think that da Silva would be probably the most ready to make an impact now, like in the foreseeable future. So I think that might be the best fit of that group. But if I were to rank them as far as the ceilings of that group, I may put Cody Williams number one, but I'll stick with my Salon. I go Salon, Cody Williams, Tristan da Silva. But I do think da Silva, you listen to all the people coming out of the interviews. I've watched him play, met him once, and he just seems like a really good kid. His brother was a really good player at Stanford back in the day. So I think he'd be a great fit. But of those three talent-wise, Cody Williams and Salon, I mean, you could argue maybe they're the 1 and 2 talent ceiling-wise in this draft potentially. So I like both those guys.
Yeah. Cody's an interesting one. Obviously, you have like the connection with his brother here, but what do you think about his upside? Like, is there a comp that sticks out to you?
I think Cody Williams. I mean, I've heard a myriad of comps. I enjoy being around Kevin O'Comp, and every time that another name gets thrown out, he's like got the Lamar Odom, Monis Buzelis thing going on. I'm like, I feel for these guys in the comp business. I think for Cody Williams, my personal feel for who he's going to be, it's like your third best player on a really good team, potentially a guy who can be a high impact player. I don't think he's your franchise key. I don't think he's your cornerstone piece, but I think he's a really good player. So if you got like an Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. mix with this guy where he's your 3-4 hybrid, where he can impact the championship team, SGA is your best player, and obviously having his brother on the team. It does feel like they have their 3 in OKC now. Maybe Dort still stays in the mix as the +1. Giddey, I don't know if he will be a part of that mix, but Cody Williams is a really good player. I don't think he'll get past 6-7 range in my opinion. I know the Hornets have a lot of interest in him as well. And I think some teams are going to bring him in and talk themselves into it because he does pop and he does have his brother already in the league and he's going to do the work. I'm just not sure he's that number 1 option, but that's kind of how this draft is. There's a lot of great like number 2, number 3, number 4 guys in the future. And you just got to find the ones that fit.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Keyshawn George?
I'm a big fan. I do, obviously, I mean, he has to grow a little bit into his game, but the project and the prospects of what he could be are very fascinating. 6'9", rangy. I think, he's going to go somewhere in that 14 to 17 range, I would presume. The Miami Heat make a lot of sense to me at like a 15. We'll see what happens. A lot of people have McCain kind of mocked there, but I mean, George is another guy that if OKC picked, talking about the Presti zone, everyone's like, of course. How do we not see this wing from Miami? You know what I mean? And I think he is a guy that has lottery talent and lottery potential that's kind of sitting there hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. How do you project guys that are low usage like him, to the league? I think that's one of like the hardest things to do.
Know.
He shot, I think he only had like double-digit shot attempts, maybe just a handful of times. They're on a really bad Miami team at that. And so like some of his tape, I just like don't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, it is hard. And it's also like FGAs are really the kind of number to look at, especially as you try to forecast the future in the league and how many shots are these guys going to be willing to take. I think with George, if I were talking to his agent, I'm just trying to figure out, is he willing to play in the G League? Is he willing to go get reps? And then we figure out, okay, what does he look like when we give him 15 shots a game? What does it look like when he's getting 20 shots a game? And then if he finds that he can be one of those guys, then we got a real hit on our hands. If we find he's more impactful, taking, 7 to 10 shots a game and making more of an impact, offensive rebounding, kind of being a 3-and-D, archetype or whatever it may be, maybe small ball 4, whatever it is. But I think if he's willing to play in the G League and go find out, that would be great news for everybody that drafts him. And I do think there's an advantage to that. Bub Carrington has that advantage. He's basically told people, I'll play in the G League next year. I'll be the starting guard on a G League team. That's good news. Like if you're front office, that makes you feel a lot better about taking a guy that does have that upside because you're like, okay, they're willing to put in that 2-year grace period. And I think George would be one of those guys.
So if the Thunder do go for a big man, which a lot of people are clamoring for, how would you rank these three bigs? Deron Holmes, Kyle Filipowski, and Zach Edey for OKC.
I really like Holmes, and it does seem like he's gotten a promise. Apparently, from some team in the first round gave him a promise. Everyone's speculating it's Denver. Who's to say who it is? I think a lot of that stuff is smoke anyway to try to drive up the value on people. I do like Holmes. Filipowski is weird to me. I mean, is he going to be like a Lauri Markkanen type at the next level? If he's going to be that type of player, he has to really improve, shot creation, dribbling, vision, dribble with his head up. I mean, so I don't know. Filipowski to me, I feel like is more of a project. You got to figure out where he fits in as a 5 or a 4. I think he's more of a 4, but again, those skills have to develop. If you're looking at him versus like a Buzelis or whatever, I think he still has a ways to go. Or Alex Sarr, right, is another person that he would be compared to that I think, he would be way behind. So Edey is the most fascinating of that group because he is such a, traditional big. And I think he can give you a nice wrinkle for 10 to 15 minutes in a game, especially someone that has, a team with Chet Holmgren as their starting center. It's like we have the forces behind him. You know what I mean? You may try to punk him at the 5 and we're going to play 5 out. But when our second unit comes in, it's this whole different experience you have to deal with. And I think Edey would be fascinating in that sense in OKC. So if I had to rank them as far as impact or who I would like the most, I think I'd take Holmes first. I'd take Edey second. I'd take Filipowski third. And maybe Filipowski puts on some weight and can turn into that 5, that stretch 5. And that would be good for him. But for whatever reason, I still think he has to slide down to the 4. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But I like Edey. I think, I got to defend Edey as a college basketball guy. So I just want to put that out there. I do like Zach Edey. People are upset with me. I have him in the second round. I'm like, I like the guy, but yeah, I still think there's some things that, would make teams not have to invest a first round pick in him, but we'll see.
Where do you have him?
I had him 31 to the Raptors. Isn't that fun?
Okay,
with the first pick of the second round, the Toronto Raptors select Zach Edey. He gets to play in his home country. Yeah.
First pick of day one. No one's really talked about that a whole lot. It's like the first pick of day one or day 2, could really mean something.
You're the number 1 pick of day 2. You know what I mean? Like you just got to say it like that.
Oh man. Okay. So you talked about Bub Carrington earlier.
Yeah.
So if I were to group these 3 guards together, I don't think all 3 will be available when the Thunder are picking, but let's say that they are. Let's say that Devin Carter, Jared McCain, and Bub Carrington are all available. How would you rank those 3?
Oof. See, I think the Bulls love Carter. I think Carter's going to be off the board at 11. I think he's out. But I do like of those 3. I mean, that's a Sophie's choice because I really like all 3 of them for different reasons, kind of. But as far as my personal affinity, I would go Bub 1 of that group. I'd go Carter 2, and then I'd go McCain. And I say that I love Jared McCain. I think Jared McCain could be, he should watch Kobe White tape all the time, and he should just be working on transition threes like it's his job. I think he can be a nice piece that ends up being your star guard potentially. But all 3 of those guys I really like. But I think Bub I like the most. Carter, I mean, KOC, Kevin O'Comps, he's loves the Derek White comp for him. I do think he's a guy who will do the dirty work as that extra guard and just kind of a nice piece. And, his dad's a coach with the Grizzlies, so he knows the NBA world a little bit. So that helps as well. And had, turnover with his coaches, had 3 different coaches. All 3 of them loved him. I think that says something about, kind of how he can be as a pro. So I really love all 3 of those guys. McCain's got a great personality, but unfortunately, I would rank him that way. So start, bench, cut. I would have to cut McCain, unfortunately. And this is not my Duke bias because I really do like McCain. I think he's a top 15 pick if I was, making selections.
Go check out all of Tate Frazier's work at The Ringer and go listen to the One Shining podcast, a great show on the Ringer Podcast Network. Thanks so much for coming on.
Of course. Appreciate you anytime.
All right. With me now, Nathan Grubel, who is the founder of Youth Movement NBA, and you can find him on Twitter at Draft Deeper. Just another draft guy here. Nathan, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me back. As we said, it's been a minute, but you've had more important things to talk about than the draft with the OKC Thunder.
That's right, which is a good thing. We're not the Detroit Pistons, who are picking 5th for the 3rd year in a row. So let's talk about this pick. It's the 12th pick. there's a lot of directions the Thunder can go. I think that there are positions of need, but I think you can feel like you can go whatever direction you want. But for you, for the Thunder, if you're on the clock at 12, who's the guy that you hope is sitting there for the Thunder?
So I would have two prospects as 1 and 1A, and we can start with either, whichever way you want to go. But I would look at Tristan Da Silva and Devin Carter would be both of my guys.
Okay. Let's talk the fit of Devin Carter first.
So Devin Carter brings a lot of what the Thunder already do well to the table. Some might argue that if you're looking the way of Devin Carter, you just drafted Case and Wallace. So why would you want to bring in Devin Carter when he's doing a lot of the same things? My answer to that is you can never have enough of the good things. As the best teams have shown us in the NBA, as what you guys did this past season, having the number of guys who can dribble, pass, shoot, defend. Carter's bringing a lot of those same things to the table, but he's also adding to the rebounding in a big way, which has been talked about as a Thunder weakness for quite a while at this point. He's also bringing a little bit more to the table in terms of being able to draw fouls from the perimeter. Very physical, tough guard, can finish at different angles, can finish over guys. I've had some questions about the touch and the jump shot, but I think he did his best to answer a lot of those questions this past season. And you already have enough guys who are going to be spending a lot of time on the ball as primary creators in terms of SGA, J-Dub, guys who you want to get a little more experience. So having Carter as another secondary, tertiary creator while having his point of attack defensive capability next to a guy like Cason Wallace, next to J-Dub and SGA, who really stepped up defensively this past year. I just think it would give you more of the best things that this team is known for while not taking anything off the table from what those other guys do well.
And then Da Silva. It's interesting because like both these guys are a little bit older and have been in college for a little bit. And the Thunder haven't taken a guy under 21 in this draft. And I like both these guys too. I'm curious to see if the Thunder would break that mold in this particular draft just because they need guys that are ready. But tell me what you like about Da Silva in OKC.
I'm curious about that aspect too. But with Da Silva, I'm answering that question very similar to how I would answer it for Carter, right? Another one of these guys who can be dribble, pass, shoot. He's another secondary connector on the wing, a bigger wing. The main drawbacks to him potentially not fitting would be if you're looking for a guy who can play more of his minutes up at the 4, he's someone who does need to continue physically filling out. I'm not sure he's ready to guard every single 4 in the league, but as a bigger wing at the 3 spot, very proven spot up jump shooter, catch and shoot guy, can attack closeouts, can make those secondary reads off the move. And then defensively, he fits very well in a team construct, which I think is more or less what the Thunder have tried to build over the last few seasons. Is we may not have every single guy on the floor is the best one-on-one defender in the NBA, but we have a few of those guys scattered in around the lineup. We have an amazing rim protecting prospect in Chet, and then you have guys who are communicating and who are playing more in amoeba with each other. So you add another guy like Da Silva, who's 6'9", coming in, able to add to that, able to shoot over, closing out defenders, able to attack and offer a lot of those same things, rebound for his position. You're just, again, the rich keep getting richer if you look at a guy like Da Silva. But I can also see arguments against him depending on what position you think you would want him to play if you're drafting him.
Let's say the Thunder can acquire any pick in this draft. They could go all the way up to 1 if you wanted them to. Who's like the guy you think the Thunder should target that's from this draft class?
So the top guy on my board is Alex Sarr. And I'm a big Sarr fan. I think that would be really interesting to pair him alongside like a Chet Holmgren in Oklahoma City or even in San Antonio if they were to go the route of the experimental him and Victor Wembanyama front court for a number of different reasons. I think the ground coverage defensively would be incredible. He's another one of these guys who's going to get his hands on the ball. He adds to what the Thunder already do in terms of playmaking defensively. So I would just question having 2 guys at that position who are a little bit thinner in that respect. I think if the Thunder are going to go after another big man, whether it's a veteran, some guy later in this draft, whatever the case may be, I think they're probably going to look at someone who has a little more girth, a little more size. I'm also a really big Stephon Castle fan. That's kind of been my biggest guy throughout this draft cycle. I get the shooting concerns, but if you're telling me you can put him in the backcourt with some of these other guys OKC's already drafted, why wouldn't you want someone who's going to fit, in my opinion, pretty seamlessly with all the other things that he brings to the table, his ability to screen set as a guard, rebounding, pushing the pace, making plays for others, showed a lot more of a willingness to score off the bounce as the year went on at Connecticut. And he's a champion. He's a winner. and you guys are doing nothing but winning nowadays in the NBA. So why not look at someone like him too?
Yeah, I'm huge on Stephon Castle. I love his competitive nature and I love his skill set. There's a lot that's been made of the big man position for the Thunder. Let's say that they do go with a big at 12, and you are given the choice of Deron Holmes, Kyle Filipowski, or Zach Edey. One, rank those three, and then tell me who you would want for the Thunder.
I'm glad you mentioned Zach Edey because he was the third name I wrote down on my list after Devin Carter and Tristan da Silva. And I think it's more so if I'm ranking those guys, I would have Edey, and then I would have Deron Holmes, and then I would have Kyle Filipowski. I've come in a little low on Kyle Filipowski. Maybe there's a chance that I'm going to have to look back in a few years and correct where I ended on my ranking. But with Zach Edey, I think it's very interesting, and this is a question I've had for multiple people around the Thunder. I'll be curious to get your answer. At what point do you look in the draft for like a change-up pitch off the bench, right? Because you've drafted and brought in a lot of players who fit this one particular style. But if you can go in an opposite direction with someone who's an outlier prospect in that opposite direction, at what point do you look at that as enticing and say, this team opposing us is going to have to game plan for this specific style in the playoffs, but we can also bring in this change-up pitch and really throw their defense for a loop for extended stretches and really have this weapon that's very hard to guard as proven at the college level.
That player better be very good.
I think Edey is very good.
That would be what I'd say. And it also, if I were looking for a change-up pitch, I would look for like an elite athlete to like be like your change-up, rather than like a giant.
Okay. I think Edey's a little bit better athletically than some want to give him credit for, but that's kind of been my 2 cents, right? Like I know it always hasn't shown up on the tape, but you look at all of his athletic testing, he's testing pretty dang well for someone who's 7'4". Even before he picked up a basketball, he was a multi-sport athlete excelling at all of those different sports. So when we talk about the definition of an athlete outside of just your traditional, how fast can you run, how high can you jump, I think Edey's pretty coordinated, pretty balanced. I love his footwork. I think he's bringing a little more to the table athletically than some would care to give him, just because of, well, how's he going to look in a drop coverage in the NBA level? Is he just going to have guards, toasting him every single trip down the floor? There's going to be matchups that he doesn't win, but he's going to bring a lot of other things to the table that an NBA team would want in terms of not just his size and his physicality around the basket, but he's a really good screen setter for someone his size. And then I think he's picked up other parts of his game too, like passing out of double teams when defenses really want to come at him hard. The last interesting part about his game is he's been a 71% career free throw shooter. And I've talked to people around the league who are optimistic that he can eventually shoot it. Maybe not taking 5 threes a game, hitting 40%, but someone who can eventually get to the point where he's actually respectable and bringing defenders out to him. So if we're talking about a guy who has size that you just can't teach and some parts of his game that he's still trying to unlock and further develop, and he's a little bit different than what a lot of other teams can match up with and bring to the table, I know it may be a little rich for some Thunder fans at pick 12, but it is a name I would consider.
Yeah, there are definitely camps within the Thunder fan base that really like Zach Edey, and then there are some that don't. I probably lean more toward the don't than the guys that do like him. But honestly, it's just funny because like we feel like we know so much, during the draft cycle, and then like you get these guys to the league, and there's so many factors that lead to like their success or failure or somewhere in between, like we just have no idea about. And so like he's not my favorite. Do I see a world with him succeeding in the NBA? Yeah, I do. The Thunder just have not expended assets to acquire like a backup center yet.
Nope.
And so we don't know what that looks like. They've never drafted a guy who's under 21 in the lottery, and they have yet to use a lottery pick outside of Chet for a big man.
Yeah.
And so like not to say that they wouldn't or they couldn't, we just haven't seen it yet. And so I would just be a little bit surprised if that's the direction that they went. Let's talk about some forwards and then a couple guards before we get you out of here.
Sure.
I don't know how to say this guy's name. Alex Spears totally like messed me up on how we say Saloon's name. Salon. Like, I don't know how to say his name.
I've been saying Saloon. I've been saying Saloon. So
I have two. So everybody knows who we're talking about. He's somebody who has been a popular name in mock drafts for the Thunder. Some of that is he's a 6'10" French big guy that people, that can kind of fly around and people really like him. But what are your thoughts on him and his fit in OKC?
The OKC Thunder already have Ousmane Dieng at home.
Yeah.
Like, in my opinion, like why are you going to look the direction of Saloon when you already have a version of that player who, in my opinion, is better in nearly every aspect? Saloon's been the one guy I've talked about on a few podcasts where I watched the tape, and I just don't get it. I don't understand why everyone's enamored with him, to be honest. I get that he plays really hard. He is a mountain of a man at that forward position, incredibly strong. When he's hitting 3-point shots, it looks good, but when he's bricking them off the side of the backboard or the top of the backboard, it's not always looking so hot. And then I question his decision-making and his ability to play as a connector on both ends of the floor from that standpoint. So if you want to bring in a young project and have him develop with the OKC Blue, something that's working out for a number of young guys in the G League with the OKC Blue, like, that's fine. But when you're trying to evaluate who can actually play real minutes next year for a team that's winning, or who can maybe get to that point in a year, I'm looking a different direction, or I'm just looking down the roster and saying, yeah, we got Ousmane Dieng at home. We're good. Let's try and use this asset and allocate in a different direction.
Let's say the Thunder are trying to decide between Jared McCain and Bub Carrington. Which way are you going?
Jared McCain.
Okay.
I've been a big Jared McCain fan. Even before this cycle really kicked off, I had a feeling that he was going to rise up to the lottery of everyone else's boards, when preseason I wasn't seeing him in top 30s at all or anywhere close to it.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why, because yeah, he's 6'3". He doesn't have this incredible wingspan, but he's strong as all get out. He plays hard. He's one of the best shot makers we have in this entire class. And even if he doesn't live up to his ceiling in terms of developing as a point guard, all of these NBA teams that either go deep in the playoffs or win championships, you can generally point to all of them and say they at least have that irrational shot maker somewhere on their bench, right? And not necessarily erratic when I say that, but just someone who's able to come in and nail a 30-footer with the utmost confidence, or make a big play when it's on the line and say, yeah, we may not be getting 30 minutes of, SGA level play from that guy, but we have someone who we can turn to, in any different scenario, any given situation, and say, go get us a bucket. And I think Jared McCain's going to do that. He's going to rebound for his position, and he's going to bring a lot to the table in terms of positive intangibles. So Jared McCain's my guy.
Go follow Nathan on Twitter at Draft Deeper. Nathan, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, with me, I've got Kyle Boone from CBS Sports. Kyle he's all things college basketball, NBA draft. You are probably the person that I know that watches the most college basketball. You think that's fair?
Depends. Do you know Matt Norlander? Do you know Gary Parrish?
I don't know Gary. I know who Gary is, but I don't know Gary.
I've got to be top 5 on your list for sure. I watch a lot of college basketball. A lot of really sloggy January, February months where it's SEC plays in action and it tips at 9:30 or for better or for worse, I watch a lot of college basketball.
Yeah. So this class is so interesting. And part of the reason why I'm doing this big show is that I just think that there's going to be so many differing opinions on who the Thunder should take, who's even going to be there at 12, what that looks like, what is a reach in this draft, what isn't a reach in this draft. I don't know. But if you're the Thunder, you got the 12th pick. Who do you think is the best fit? Who's the guy that you would want if you're OKC?
The guy who I recently mocked, I think, is the guy who I think would be the best fit, and that's Kyle Filipowski. I was talking with my barber earlier today, and he's like, what do you think about Khalil Ware at number 12? I'm like, that's a reach. I don't think I'd take a big that high, but Filipowski is maybe the exception. He's 6'11". Could have been a one to done last year. Actually had 2 hip surgeries in the offseason, came back as a sophomore at Duke, which doesn't happen very often. Improved as a shooter, came back, shot 35% from 3-point range. A very good rebounder, was kind of Duke's offensive hub, just like a passer, scorer, could do a little bit of everything. Played next to Derek Lively as a true freshman. I think that is important. And obviously, I think the goal for the Thunder is to get someone who can play alongside Chet Holmgren, or at least give Chet Holmgren some breathers. I think he could do a little bit of both. And at number 12, I don't feel like that's a reach. So Filipowski, I think the fit that he would provide for OKC, the skill set, obviously they need to add some size, whether that's in the draft or free agency or some combination of both. I think Filipowski would check kind of a lot of boxes and provide, instead of going to get, a Hartenstein or something like that, a cheap, rookie deal contract.
Yeah, I've been in on Flip for a while, and it's specifically for the Thunder because I think that I don't think it's easy to be a like Thunder big man. I think that you have to have a lot of skill. And I think he is one of the most skilled bigs in this draft. Now, I will ask you, there's another big man that has become kind of a Thunder fan darling in Deron Holmes. How would you measure like those two against each other? And why would you go Flip instead of Deron Holmes?
Yeah, I've seen the buzz. I've seen Deron Holmes love, and I'm kind of there. I've been high on Deron Holmes throughout the draft process, but I don't have him this high. I have Filipowski rated higher than Deron Holmes. Filipowski's, I think, a more complete player in terms of what he can bring as a passer, as kind of a short roll guy, someone who can add some playmaking. Deron Holmes, that's not really his game. The flash that Holmes provides, I think, is more exceptional and maybe pops off of tape more than what Filipowski provides. Filipowski's not someone who's going to be kind of a lob threat, who has like a sick mixtape, like Deron Holmes. I think when you watch the highlight reel, you're like, whoa, this dude, he can get up. Like he just threw a lob down from, 15 feet above the rim. And he can shoot from 3-point range. He blocks shots, and all of it is like spectacular theater. But I think Filipowski is like the more complete prospect, the more Thunder prospect, in that he is more dynamic on both ends of the floor. Certainly, I think what Holmes does would end up working for OKC, but I think there's so much crossover with what Holmes does and what Holmgren does that, I think if I'm making that pick, I would probably side with Flip over Deron Holmes.
You have a good comp for Flip?
Like a bigger Dario Saric.
Oh, okay.
Someone who can stretch the floor. He moves okay in space. I was watching some of his defensive stuff, and no one is going to be 7 foot tall and defending well in space at elite level. Like even, Rudy Gobert struggles doing that. But the way that he defends in space and defends in the pick and roll, I think is pretty encouraging. I think he's pretty dynamic, like on both ends of the floor, and pretty underrated. So yeah, I think like a Dario Saric plus, like a supercharged version of him, is something that I could see for him. I think he's a really good 3-point shooter. So there's a lot to like with Flip.
Yeah. If the Thunder were looking to draft a wing, there's Cody Williams, Saloon, De Silva. Let's say all three of those guys are on the board.
Yeah.
Which one of those three would you like the best for the Thunder?
I would take Saloon. I'm not sure he's going to be there at number 12. That would be the thing. And then I would probably go Cody Williams second if I were, just picking in kind of a vacuum. Saloon is very dynamic. He feels like a very Thunderish player in that, kind of watching the draft from afar over the last few years, OKC kind of has a type. They really like kind of like big, long wings who are dynamic, athletic, can shoot it, have a high IQ, checks all those boxes. He loves his outside game. He's very confident in his outside game, sometimes to a fault. I think he needs to add some strength, some finishing, some attacking to become more dynamic on offense. But man, he's a chaotic player too, and very fun to watch. He's a glorious finisher around the rim. When you watch Saloon, he throws down dunks with authority, and he has like the Derek Lively feet up finish.
Mhm.
That is just like the staple of Derek Lively and his lobs. His go-to finishes like the two-handed throwdown. He kicks his feet up and then does like the one-handed release. It's just art. Love the way that he plays. I think he would be like a really high-level role player. And then Cody Williams, I think just for the vibes alone, you're bringing in Jalen Williams' younger brother, but he's a great shooter too. Someone who, last year we saw with Cason Wallace, like can be a plug and play contributor. I think Cody Williams, there's some questions about maybe his frame because he's a little bit slimmer. I think he needs to add some strength. But there's a lot there for him, I think, to grow into something more than, just a spot up shooter. But right now, I think he could be like a spot up shooter who adds defense and length at a really high level. And then obviously, to steal a phrase from Michael Jordan, the ceiling is the roof with Cody Williams. So I like both of those guys quite a bit. I think Tristan da Silva at number 12 would be just a tad bit rich for me, but certainly, if you're looking for someone who can compete right away, the size, defense, shooting that da Silva could bring, I wouldn't be too terribly mad either. And obviously, a few years ago, Jalen Williams gets picked number 12. That felt a little bit high. It turns out like that was the obvious correct decision for the Thunder.
Yeah. And then I'm going to ask you about guards, and then I'll get you out of here.
Okay.
Let's say, and I know that Devin Carter probably won't be there at 12, but let's just, for the sake of this, let's say if you would rank McCain, Devin Carter, and Bub Carrington, how would you rank those three?
Carter, McCain, Carrington.
Okay.
Carter, I think to me, is the most complete player. There are some holes in his offensive game that I think he answered this past season at Providence. He was the Big East Player of the Year, made 38% from three, 86th percentile on catch and shoots, according to Synergy, which is really good. He reminds me of kind of like a George Hill type who can play both on and off the ball, has an improved shot, but defensively, I think is where you're kind of most excited. For Devin Carter. The defense has always been fantastic. It's the offense and the playmaking that I think has been an area of improvement for him and something that he's shown growth in the last couple of years. He has a good pedigree. His dad's obviously Anthony Carter, who works for the Memphis Grizzlies, who, by the way, pick at number 9. Just something to keep an eye on. I think there's a lot to like with Devin Carter. He's a little bit of an older prospect. But still like just a very high floor type guy who I think, again, if you're competing as you're expected to be for the Thunder, would make a lot of sense for them at 12.
And then how do you parse out McCain and Carrington? Carrington's a guy that is also kind of getting some steam in the Thunder community. I blame Sam Vecenie for that. But what are your thoughts on just like those two and how they could fit with the Thunder?
Yeah, no, I love Carrington. Maybe not as much as Vecenie, but I do love Carrington. McCain to me is the best movement shooter in this class, and it's why I have mocked him to the Thunder a few times.
Mm-hmm.
He's shot 41.4% from 3-point range at Duke, 95th percentile in catch and shoot situations when guarded last season, 93rd percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, had just shy of 2 assists per game. He's a really good rebounder just for his size and for his position, very tenacious. He's very good on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen his TikToks, but
yes.
Very, very entertaining. I only follow like 3 people on TikTok. He is absolutely one of them. But yeah, like I think just the movement shooting, the way that he can make tough shots is going to translate at a really high level. Like people really like Reed Sheppard because of his shooting stats at Kentucky, but I actually think Jared McCain is the better shooter.
Wow.
Those two.
Ooh, I like that.
A little bit spicy, but I think you could get like a better shooter in Jared McCain than you can with Reed Sheppard. Like Reed Sheppard, I think his defense and his athleticism is maybe puts him above Jared McCain, but McCain, just the way that he's able to quickly load his shot. Reed kind of brings his shot down a little bit, takes maybe a split second more. So I think there's a lot to like with Jared McCain. Now, the Thunder are pretty set at the guard spot in the backcourt in general.
Yeah.
I generally think, though, that Presti just like drafts the best player and just kind of hopes and prays that eventually it's going to work out. It wouldn't be surprising if McCain is that guy at number 12. Carrington, to me, like dynamic shooter, but not near the same movement shooter as Jared McCain. I see more of like point guard than shooting guard with Carrington. I like his size, obviously. I think his defensive tools are very interesting, something to bet on long term. It's weird in that, for a long time I had Carrington kind of in the 20s, and he's had this like meteoric late rise, and maybe it is because of Sam Vecenie. A lot of NBA teams really like his dynamism and what he can do on both offense and defense. And there's obviously a lot to like with Carrington, who's kind of screaming up boards kind of late in this draft process.
Go check out Kyle's work at CBS Sports. Anything else that you want to plug before we go?
No. Appreciate you having me. Go to cbssports.com. I'll have a mock draft on Friday. We have a new top 75 big board prospect rankings for the 2024 draft class, which is, the draft is like just over a week away. So appreciate everyone reading, and go check that out.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
You got it.
I've got Tyler Metcalf of the No Ceilings crew with me. Tyler, how's it going?
Andrew, I'm fantastic. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics, but no one cares about that. That's old news. We got draft. It's officially draft season for everyone.
It's time to move on, everybody.
Stop dwelling on the past.
So the Thunder are in an interesting spot. They're obviously a competitive team. They have this 12th pick that they got from the Rockets. And I think there's guys I actually find that there's going to be a lot of guys in this range that can help. I feel the more that I think about this range, the more I'm like, one, don't trade up. And two, just, they're going to have options of good players here. But if you're the Thunder, you're staying at 12. Who's the guy that you like the most in this range?
I think it's Tristan da Silva.
Okay.
He's a little older, so, the upside isn't necessarily there, but man, can that dude play. And when you talk about versatility, feel, ability to kind of dribble, pass, shoot, defend, and really high character guy, especially around 12, I'm not sure there's a better player in that range who fits all of the stuff that the Thunder typically look for.
What kind of comp would you give him? Like if you're thinking about like how he fits with the Thunder and like who he would be with the Thunder, like what's a good pro comp for him?
Guys kind of like non-Charlotte Nick Batum, Robert Covington, that kind of toolsy, super versatile team defender who can knock down open shots, make the extra pass, rebound at a decent level. The tricky thing with Da Silva is that like when you look at his numbers, they're solid, but none of them are like, oh my God, this dude's a clear lottery pick. But then you watch the film and you watch the rotations and the verticality, and if basketball tracked hockey assists, he would be filling up that category. So he's just one of those guys that constantly makes the right play, and defensively you're almost never going to have to worry about him because he's just always in the right spot.
That's very interesting. I don't know that I was expecting Da Silva. I wonder, so if the Thunder are in this interesting spot, and I think Da Silva actually like works really well because they're competitive now, and you need guys that can play now. You don't need guys that need 2 or 3 years to, figure it out. You need guys that can play, and him being an older prospect certainly, checks that box. The shooting obviously is something that they need on the perimeter, and the size too. My thing with Da Silva, do you think he's a good enough rebounder to play that 4 spot for the Thunder? Because that to me is the spot that needs to be solidified. And I'm not saying that they're going to necessarily use this pick to solidify that spot. They could go trade for somebody or whatever, and Da Silva could be a backup still. But if you're going to play this spot, I feel like you need to be at least like a good rebounder. Like that to me has been kind of my hang up with him.
Yeah, and I think that's fair because he's not the biggest guy in terms of, strength or muscle or anything like that. And with, or just his kind of raw rebounding numbers are pretty average. But I think a lot of that was, one, Colorado had Eddie Lampkin, who is a massive human being, in the post a lot, and he just kind of gobbled up a ton of those rebounds. And they had De Silva switching a ton out on the perimeter. So when he's defending out there, it's a lot of, switching pick and rolls, hard hedging, recovering, doing all that kind of stuff. So it pulls him away from the rim a little more. I think his rebounding his rebounding is a little better than the numbers might indicate. But I do think it's fair that would be one of the bigger concerns, because he's not super strong. He doesn't have a huge track record of being a monster rebounder, and there are definitely other routes to go down. But I think instinctually and intelligence-wise and feel-wise, I think he's really solid and reliable in that kind of aspect of rebounding.
So if it is, let's say that De Silva, his teammate Cody Williams, and Saloon just happen to all be available at 12, how would you rank those three, and who would you want the most if you're OKC? I
would go De Silva, Cody, who I have both in the same tier, and then Saloon after that. And if you're talking about needing to get stronger, Cody is definitely in that bucket. I love Cody's long-term upside, but I would be shocked if he's contributing to a team, especially one like the Thunder, in his first 2 years. It feels more kind of like an Ousmane Dieng type of pick, where it's like, okay, hey, in year 3, let's see what we're really getting from him full time. And Saloon is kind of in that same realm. I'm just not sold on where the feel is with him, because the flashes are insane. He plays his butt off constantly. Like, you never forget when he's on the court. He never disappears, but he doesn't always exactly know what he's doing out there, it feels like. So that's always one of those tricky conundrums of, is it because he has no clue what he's doing and it's just pure effort stuff, or is it because he's kind of raw and that next level of coaching and development will unlock a ton? And if you have him top 10-ish, that's kind of the direction you're going to be leaning.
Mm-hmm. Let's say that the Thunder you look at the Thunder roster, probably the last thing you think they need is a guard. But I've been asking this question. If you could choose between these three guards, and you probably have to trade up to get Devin Carter if that's who they really wanted, but how would you rank Devin Carter, Jared McCain, and Bub Carrington? Those are like three guards that I think would all probably fit reasonably with the Thunder.
I would probably go McCain first, Carter, then Carrington. Oh, Carter and Carrington would be real close. Yeah. I would have McCain first, just because I think he provides something that the Thunder don't necessarily. It's just a different type of flavor where, I'd be a little concerned about the Carter, Case and Wallace overlap. I think they do a lot of really similar things. Carrington's kind of more in that dynamic pull-up shooter type of role. Maybe he could grow into what they kind of hoped Trey Mann was going to be. Yeah. Backup point guard off the bench, really awesome pull-up shooter, really good passer. I thought his defense improved a lot, but I think McCain's just lethal off-ball shooting, and he shot 61% at the rim in the half court for a 6'2" guard. Not bad. Ton of craft, incredibly strong. You talk about rebounding. He's one of the best rebounding guards in this class, and I do think he has a little more kind of playmaking upside to him, where he can hopefully steer a little more towards that point guard development out of that kind of combo guard, pure shooting guard role.
Yeah, I'm big on Jared McCain. The more I think about it, I'm just like, they should just take McCain.
The Thunder love good people, and by all accounts, you will not find a bad piece of intel out there with McCain. By all accounts, he just is an awesome human being.
Mm-hmm. And then the Thunder do need a big. I don't know if I want to address it via the draft, but they could address it via the draft. And the guys that I think would probably fit best with the Thunder, Kyle Filipowski, I think, is a pretty seamless fit with OKC. Deron Holmes, I feel the same about. And I just can't avoid talking about Zach Edey. Everybody wants to talk about Zach Edey to the Thunder. How would you rank those three for the Thunder if they're picking at 12? If they're just saying, hey, listen, we're going to pick it big at 12. It's going to be one of these three. How would you rank them?
I would probably go Filipowski, Holmes, then Edey. Okay. I don't love any of them at 12. It feels like a reach for me. Okay. I think a guy like Donovan Clingan would be incredible there, but you're going to have to move up into the top 2 or 3 probably to get him. I think Filipowski is super physical, really good rebounder, really good passer too. All of that kind of fits into what the Thunder need and want with their guys. I'm not totally sold on how he scores. And he's kind of billed as a stretch 5, but we have 2 years of him not really shooting it. The mechanics look good, but we have 2 years of pretty substantial samples of the shot just not going in. So I'm just kind of at the point of I need to see it. And I'm not entirely confident that he provides a whole lot more than Jalen Williams is already giving them. So,
yeah,
if they traded back into the late first, and we're able to kind of grab Filipowski or Holmes, I would love that. I love the fit of both those guys. Theoretically, just going at 12 feels like a pretty big reach, at least for me. But I do know some people have Filipowski that high.
Mm-hmm. And then thoughts on Holmes? Like he's a little bit undersized, but when you watch him, like there's just a lot that pops.
Another one of these guys who just got better every single year. I think the shooting is very legitimate. It's just how real is the rebounding? I think it's fine. I've seen a lot of people kind of point to the rebounding numbers tailing off a lot this year, but that's because he was on the perimeter a lot more. Mm-hmm. You look at his 3-point volume, it like tripled or quadrupled from last year. So obviously the offensive rebounding numbers are going to drop. And I think he would be awesome as like a backup center to Chet. There'd probably be some instances that they can kind of play together like we saw with Chet and Jalen Williams late in the season. But I think his skill, his feel, and again, going to the character aspect, I think he would be a really, really fun fit, but 12 just feels rich.
Yeah. And then where are you on Zach Edey? I feel like you could just you could go anywhere. Like there's some people that think the Thunder should take him at 12, but like I'm not one of those guys, but I don't know where you're at.
I'm with you. I have more in like the 20s. I think he's going to be a really solid backup center for a long time. He's obviously massive. The way that he's developed and improved his footwork over the last couple years has been outstanding. Like he moves so much better than he gets credit for. Awesome rebounder, super efficient finisher. It's draft season, it's workout season. So obviously we're getting reports of, oh, he's going to shoot it. It's like, nah, he's probably not going to ever shoot it. If he did, fantastic. I'm skeptical. And I just wish there was more of that passing with him than like what we saw with Holmes and Filipowski and Clingan this year, when I just never got that sense. So a lot of his assists just kind of came out of being double or triple teamed and kicking out to Foster Lawyer or one of their other really good shooters. I don't think that's going to happen to him in the NBA necessarily. There weren't a ton of like dynamic reads or short roll creation from him. So I'm just a little worried about what he can kind of do in terms of facilitation or outside of offensive rebounding and rim running in an NBA half court offense. And can he just not get run off the floor? He's an awesome, his conditioning is fantastic, but just pure speed wise, can he keep up?
Mm-hmm. Go check out No Ceilings. If you're listening to this, like you probably know about No Ceilings, but like you should go check out their stuff. It is like genuinely great. I love kind of like what you guys have created over the last few years is really, really cool. So go check that out. You can go follow No Ceilings at No Ceilings NBA. Go follow Tyler at T Metcalf 11. I feel like they're creating like new things like every hour, it seems like. So they have a podcast, they have YouTube, they have articles that they're writing. You can just any way that you like to consume media, and especially draft media, they've got it. So go check them out. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate it.
All right, with me now, I've got Krysten Peak from Yahoo Sports. Krysten, thanks so much for coming on.
I'm happy to be here. This is the best time of the year, and I can't wait to see the chaos that unfolds with this draft on Wednesday and Thursday.
That's the truth. I read so many mock drafts. I read yours, Vecenie's, everybody's, and I'm just like, man, this is one of the harder drafts to actually figure out where these guys are going because it is so flat. Like there's so much to like about this draft, but yet you look at almost every player and you're like, oh man, they have this like one giant flaw. and like what do teams do with that? And I think opinions are just all over the map because there are just so many good players that have these like major flaws.
I think, when we look at this draft, it's not a Victor Wembanyama draft. It's not a Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey draft that we're going to see next year. And so what teams are looking for is the supporting cast. They're looking for players that can come in and support who they already have on their team. And that's tough for players, in the top 5 because they're looking to rebuild, so they aren't going to be drafting that star player to kind of build around. And so that's what makes it so interesting. I think there's only 3 teams that know exactly what they're doing on draft night on Wednesday and Thursday. I think the Atlanta Hawks know exactly who they're taking. I think the Washington Wizards have zeroed in on Alex Sarr. And I think the Los Angeles Lakers are going to draft Bronny James at 55, and the floodgates are going to open. Nobody's going to play chicken with Rich Paul and Clutch, and they're just going to let the Lakers take them at 55. Those are the only 3 teams that know exactly what they're doing.
Who do you think the Hawks are taking?
I think Ricochet is really the strong pick. I know there's been that kind of discussion between bringing in Donovan Clinton, who did work out with the Hawks. I mean, Donovan only worked out with 3 teams inside the top 5. It was the Hawks, it was Washington, and it was Detroit. So I don't see him falling past 6. I think if he is there past 5 and no one makes a play at 3 to trade up for him, because we're hearing that Memphis really likes him. We're hearing that Chicago really likes him. So they might, you might see Houston try to hold him hostage and say, oh no, like we might take him, so that is going to be the interesting pick at 3. But I ultimately think if there are no significant trades at 3, then they'll take Reed Shepherd, the Spurs will take Steph Castle, and they'll just go on from there.
Yeah. So the Thunder are in an interesting position, having a lottery pick, being the number 1 team in the West. They're at this space where I think they still want upside at 12, but you can't take a guy who's like too much of a project because it's just so hard to develop those kind of guys when you have a really good team.
Yeah.
If you're the Thunder, who do you hope is there at 12?
We were just talking about this. Like, we have no idea. We have no idea what Sam Presti's going to do. And I kind of love that. Like, I always look at this at the Thunder pick, and I'm just like, oh, it's on the board. Like, who are they going to take? Last year, Case and Wallace, everyone's like, huh. And he was a seemingly perfect fit for OKC. So I have no idea what they're going to do. Obviously, I don't think Cody Williams, the brother of Jalen Williams, is going to be there at 12. So we're not going to get that brother duo in OKC. I don't even know if they keep the pick. If they do, I mean, I think historically speaking, we've seen Presti kind of value the long wing defensive machines, playmakers, keeping teams guessing. You got Shea, you've got Kaysen, you got Josh kind of running the show. You've got your unicorn with Chet. And so having those pieces where it's just like, okay, is he going to have the ball? Is he going to have the ball? Kind of floor spacers is kind of historically speaking, what OKC has valued. So Tijan Salon is a name. I know he's worked out with OKC. I know he's worked out with the Spurs at 8. Him and Victor Wembanyama share the same agent and Boone Njai. And I also know he's worked out in Detroit. So his draft range is everywhere. I think his floor is OKC at 12, just in terms of his upside and just what he brings with his, what Sam Presti has wanted in the past. But then you look at culture guys, and you look at guys that in this draft, you just want to bring in, you want to be able to implement the OKC culture. They fit very well. Jared McCain, I know, has worked out there. We all saw the picture at the airport. I think he is a good fit. Also, Jacoby Walter. I mean, this is a guy who is semi a local kid, has great upside as a perimeter shooter. Is he a finished product? No, but he is a great locker room guy. He's a great culture guy. And if anything, we know OKC has the best intel gatherers in the business. So anything off the court that Presti is worried about, they're going to know every single thing about these players. So that's why, I kind of think those guys are good fits for OKC.
Yeah, Jacoby with the wingspan too. Like the Thunder like guys that have plus wingspans, and he's like almost like 5 wingspan, which is really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wonder about the playmaking with him because they just like everybody to be able to play make. What are your thoughts on his ability to kind of expand that?
I feel like he was a little pigeonholed at Baylor this year. You know, you look at the perimeter play that they had. I mean, they were ridiculous on the perimeter. You know, so he went in for that role and it was, okay, you are a shooter. You are our catch and shoot shooter. If not, then, you know, make a quick decision, make a quick pass. And we saw the same with Keontae George at Baylor. You know, he kind of was hidden a little bit. And now at Utah, he was a first team all rookie year. Within the first 2 months, he was averaging 6 assists per game.
Yeah.
And so when you look at like the Baylor system compared to the upside of these guards that Baylor traditionally gets, I think that that's overlooked in terms of their playmaking. And with Jacoby, with Keontae, with VJ Edgecombe coming up, I mean, it's just this trail of players that translate to the NBA and that can come in and contribute at a high level, you know, right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are definitely some things that make sense about him. I've heard the Thunder linked to Keyshawn George. I don't know about taking him at 12, but if the Thunder did get a hold of Keyshawn, what's your thoughts on him and how he translates to the pro game too?
The thing with Keyshawn is, I mean, he shot up 4 inches over a year and he started out as a point guard. So the way he sees the floor, his quick decision, his passing is unbelievable. You go back and you watch the little film that he had at Miami. It is unbelievable in terms of the spacing. Like when they really space the floor, he was one of the best decision makers on the court, you know, at such a young age and you know, just a freshman. And you add that with his length and his 3-point shooting, his high release, his quick twitch. I mean, I think that really caters to the NBA game. His ceiling is probably 12 with OKC. I would not be shocked if they took him. And I think his floor is probably in the early 20s with either, you know, New Orleans or New York, you know, in that mid-20 range. So anywhere in between, like he's been on like this workout spree. I know he's working out with the Utah Jazz leading up to the draft. So he might even be at play at 10 if they decide to pass on a guard, which I know you look at Danny Ainge and he said at the end of the season, Keontae George is not our lead guard. He's not our franchise point guard. And so does that mean that they're going to be targeting a point guard here, which is 2 spots before OKC picks?
Yeah. So a lot of people want to talk about big men for the Thunder. I don't necessarily think that they're going to select a big in this draft, but if you had to choose between, or I guess rank these guys, Deron Holmes, Zach Edey, and Kyle Filipowski, how would you rank those 3 for the Thunder?
Exactly how you just said. Deron Holmes, Deron Holmes, Zach Edey, and then Kyle Filipowski. And Kyle Filipowski is falling, and I don't think it's anything. It doesn't really reflect his body of work at Duke. It's more when teams are starting to have players come in, when they look at the combine, when they look at the agility, everything. They over scout, they overdo everything. They're like, who is the best fit for us? I think Filipowski and his limited lateral movement, his limited outside shooting kind of is having him slide a little bit to the back half of the first round. I love Deron Holmes. I think if we've learned anything from the NBA playoffs, the NBA championship, the 5-man out, the floor spacers, the 7-foot+ guys that can kind of be utilized in different positions on the floor is really the direction of the NBA. And Deron Holmes fits that mold, shooting over 40% from 3 at Dayton. Is he like a finished product? Is he going to come in right away? I don't think so, but you're right. Like 2-3 years from now, we're going to be looking at him as a very productive contributor on an NBA team.
Yeah. And then Zach Edey, where are you at on Zach Edey?
I've kind of had to come around on him a little bit. I just wrote on him yesterday, and people are telling me, multiple people have told me within the industry that he's going to be off the board by 20. I love his fit in Toronto, just being a hometown hero, playing for the Canadian national team this year, going to Paris for the Olympics. I think that would be a fun fit for him. Am I sold on him as an NBA center? No. I think he's still a defensive liability. I think he's going to be headhunted in the PNR and targeted off the switch. He knows that coming in. I don't know at 7'4", 7'5", 300 pounds, how much durability he's going to have in an 82 game season.
Yeah.
So a team that is picking him is going to have to know exactly how they want to use him. That's probably in the secondary unit, 15-ish minutes a night, trying to be that rim protector, that big body, because he's huge.
Yeah.
Any team, any player that is going to be looking to drive the lane is going to second guess seeing him sitting there. So I think that's going to be his role. I'm still very skeptical on him being picked so high, but this is ultimately the perfect draft for him.
Yeah. What's the best? Okay, so this is where I think you thrive. What is the best story in this draft?
Oh man. Gosh, Enrique Freeman, I think, has an amazing story. This is a guy who came into Akron, wasn't even on the team. He was playing intramural ball, and the coach just happened to walk through the gym and said, "Hey, do you want to, come walk on our team?" And so he was a walk-on, eventually a scholarship player. Then he got invited to the Portsmouth Invitational, which is like the first journey in the pre-draft process for the fringe guys that are going to be drafted. Killed it at Portsmouth, got an invite to the G League Combine, which is like, the second tier. Killed it at the G League Combine, and then got an invite to the NBA Draft Combine, was amazing in the 5-on-5 scrimmages. And remember, this is after he had competed already in those two events prior that are, the G League Combine is only a few days before. And now we're looking at him in the early second round. So when you think about Enrique Freeman and his journey, and also Dalton Connect, like, he is by far knows 0 Division I offers as a high school recruit, JUCO for 2 years, went to Northern Colorado, then elected to transfer to Tennessee. He was one of the most sought after players in the portal, chose Tennessee over Kansas and North Carolina, was the number 1 scorer in the SEC, and now he's going to be a top 10 pick. Like, those two stories, everyone wants to like hate on the transfer portal because there's always 1,000+ kids entering it. But without the transfer portal, we would not have stories like Dalton Connect.
The best draft storyteller, Krysten Peak. Thanks so much for coming on Down to Dunk. Really appreciate you. Go check out all of her coverage at Yahoo Sports. With me now, I've got Kyle Mann of The Ringer to talk about these draft prospects. Kyle, how's it going, man?
It's going good. It's going excellent. It's interesting to be on an OKC show. I feel like more familiar, right? Like I feel like having visited there, it's like it's not as foreign a concept to me now. I got to get in there in the mud and roll around down there in OKC. So, but it's nice to speak with a true guy there, and met you in person for the second time, I think. But we were in your natural habitat, so you were in your element.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have giant lips behind me right now. I was trying to see if I can get a hold of some giant lip photos to put behind me, but
Tyler's like, "Do you do anything about the lips? What about the lips?"
Oh man, you should go check out the video. What's the best way to search for this video that you made about Oklahoma City and basketball and everything? Like, what's the best way to search for that?
Home and away Ringer would be maybe, I don't know, with the most efficient SEO. I guess the problem I have going here is there's a New Zealand soap opera called Home and Away that I discovered. Really? Maybe should have researched that one, but I think we're clear on that international soap opera law. I don't think they're going to come after me, but that's the most efficient way to do that. That's on our Ringer YouTube channel. Tyler's on the thumbnail, so there you go. That's another easy way to find it.
And it's a great thumbnail. It's a great video too. It was really fun. I was really to be part of it.
And you contributed a lot. Yeah, you were great. You were a soundbite machine. We had to chop that thing way down. We may release it in its entirety. Rylan, I apologize to him. We had to make some really hard choices because he had some funny quotes. But I was happy with how it turned out.
Oh yeah. So the Thunder so we're actually less than a week away from the draft. We're recording this on Thursday. This will drop as like a big show probably over the weekend, but we're less than a week away from the draft. The Thunder have the 12th pick. They also have the ability to move up or down or whatever they want to do because they have so many assets. But if you're the Thunder, you're sitting at 12, who do you hope is there and who would you take if you were OKC?
I guess you're zooming out and you're thinking like I have hesitancy to like think of this draft as like, all right, we're gonna solve the print. We're going to solve the problems that were like on the printout that the Mavs gave us from the playoffs. I think one of the big things on that printout would be abnormal PJ Washington out of body experience thing there, but hopefully that won't be a thing next time around because he kind of turned into a pumpkin a little bit after that. But do you want to try to solve the issue of getting a big athletic four who can kind of stop dribble penetration? The big creating forwards, 4s and 5s in the league, the guys that are in that 6'8" to 7 foot range are kind of the biggest quandaries in the league. If you think about Jason Tatum, if you think about Luka Doncic, if you think about Jokic, they're tough questions to answer, or Jimmy Butler or LeBron. I feel like OKC is still kind of looking for that guy. They have like every other tool in the cupboard. I think if you like defensively, I said over the course of the playoffs that I thought that they were sort of like the early Pokemon stage of the Celtics. I felt like the Celtics are sort of like I'm not a Pokemon guy, but I remember like you had to get to a certain like experience points level to level them up.
Yeah, they're like the Charizard. The Thunder have evolved from Charmander to Charmeleon, as I think what you're trying to say.
Your expertise there was just perfect to swoop in and rescue me, because I knew how to make that reference, but you put the icing on it. You put the royal icing on that cake, on the metaphor of that cake. And I think that for them, I don't know that I'm going to be able to solve the issue. I guess there's also the thing of like, you want to have another big, they went and got Biyombo. It'd be nice to, I feel like over the course of the year, there was some resistance to that idea of like going to get big, because, styles make fights, as we saw in the playoffs. I think styles really dictated the finals, whereas like the Dallas Boston matchup was really bad for Dallas. And if you're OKC, you don't want to punt the idea of you want to force people to play your style. You want to be ready for anything, but you don't want to compromise your identity, because we've seen examples of that over the decades of teams being like, well, we got to be ready for this and that, and then you sort of water down what you do. So if you're OKC, you want to hedge a little, but not give up on your bet. And I don't think they're going to do that. But so you also don't want to have like 12 guys on the same timeline. That's the other thing. I don't know. I'd be curious to ask you about that. Is like, what do you think the appetite or tolerance will be for them to add another dude who like, well, we got to see what he's going to be in a couple of years? I feel like they would lean towards somebody that's a little more ready to go now, right? Maybe a 22, 23-year-old.
So this is interesting. The Thunder have never drafted anybody 20 older than 21 in the lottery. Never done it. And I think Mitch McGary was one of the older guys that they've ever drafted, and he was in the 20s. Obviously, Josh Eustace was at the very end of the first round, and that was also a special circumstance. But like, they just draft young guys. Like, that's just what their MO has been all along. I mean, they drafted Terrence Ferguson when they really needed a role player, and so I think that they want to. They still, in my mind, I think they still want upside at 12. Like,
you still think so?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're I like the idea of Edey there, honestly, because I think Edey would just be a really fascinating, and we were saying this on the draft show, because I think the thing that people screw up about Edey when they're talking about him is they're like, well, where does he fit? Where does he fit? It's like, no, I think Edey is his own little context. Edey is this like weird little that's really the wrong way to put it. He's this intriguing compartment that you can bring in and be like, this guy isn't the focal point of what we do, but we're going to bring him in for a few minutes for a little bit. And what he does is so efficient that maybe you'll be able to like scheme him out over the course of a full game. But like for a few minutes, we're going to force you to play a certain style. Like we're going to force you to contend with the fact that he is a lob threat. I like the idea of him as like a screener with some of these drivers. He's a very physical player. He has a really simple kind of bag around the rim. But if you want to fit just sort of like the model of what they do, they want, it's that 5-out mentality, that 5-out switchable mentality. The idea of trading up, guys that I could see them being interested in and trading up. I mean, I do think that like Devin Carter fits what they like to do.
Yeah.
I think McCain fits what they like to do. I think Cody Williams could fit what they like to do. So, maybe they don't try to go solve the size issue there. They just kind of continue doubling down on what they're doing. Like, I guess you can never have enough switchability and shooting and penetration. It really all just kind of comes down to how they're viewing this draft in terms of like solving their problems, because they may be looking at like an OG Anunoby, or I posited to you the Okongwu thing, or somebody, or even a Hartenstein. Maybe they're looking like, okay, we'll go get that through that mode of talent acquisition, and we'll continue, like you were saying, and do, because every indication is they'll do what you were saying, that they won't draft an older player there.
Yeah, I think that they also can see what's coming, and that they're going to get expensive in a couple of years. And so finding role players, or even guys that can function in these rookie scale deals that are cheap, that can help you, like a Cason Wallace, who I think is kind of that's like the sweet spot, right? A guy that can contribute now, but you still think has some upside there because of his age and some of his versatility. And so I kind of look at those kind of guys, which it's kind of hard to find who that guy is, especially in this like 12 range. I do like Cody. I think that he could be one of those guys that could play like a really small role for you and then maybe grow into something more. Jared McCain has become like maybe one of my favorite prospects. I do worry about like the lack of wingspan, because the Thunder just love guys that have long wingspans. But I just can't help but think that guy has a role in the NBA like almost right away because of the shooting, and he's pretty big. Like, he's 6'3", but like he's strong.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, I just can't get away from that idea.
Yeah, I think he has a little more driving playmaking upside than he gets credit for, but like he also is just a really solid movement shooter. I think he's got a strong frame. I think he's going to be able to guard like point of attack defense. I think was one of the most key things in the playoffs this year. Yeah, I like him there. I think Carlton Carrington could make sense for them, but you're adding kind of dissonance among your pieces. It's kind of like, where they've already got guys who didn't get, like Trey Mann didn't get in. It got to the point where it's just like, well, there's probably a better opportunity elsewhere for him, and you parlay that for somebody that you think can solve some of your problems. But Jurisic is a guy that I really like in this draft, who's bigger, doesn't have necessarily the wingspan that you're talking about, but like he has a lot of the spatial intelligence that they like. So it's just a few of the ones. It'll be interesting for me just to see how they handle this front court issue. I mean, do you think they're going to be going after like I don't know, trading up to get like a Klingon? They'd have to trade way up to do that, though. It's like I don't even know if offensively that would make the most sense.
Yeah, to me that one doesn't make a ton of sense. I would guess that they want more versatile big men than Klingon, and Chet is their center. Like, that's the thing. It's like Chet's playing 30 plus minutes. Do you trade up to draft Klingon, who is like a center only, and then bring him in to play backup? I just have a hard time believing that they would actually want to do that. I think that they would want a more versatile backup big that can kind of play the 4 and the 5, which is why a lot of Thunder fans like Holmes.
I was literally getting ready to say Deron Holmes. So yeah, he's an interesting idea there, because a guy that can do a little bit of both. Yeah, I think it may be a little rich at 12, but maybe you could trade down. Also, this draft is so flat that what we think is rich, we have no clue if it is. We honestly have no idea, because I think the draft order could be kind of shocking, honestly. Okay, before you go, give us your guy. Who is your Thunder guy at 12? If you think the Thunder should definitely take this guy on draft night next week, number 12. I mean, if he's there, I think Carter would be a great pick for them. Like, I really do think he fits a lot of what they do. He defends his ass off, plus wingspan, can hit shots. He's gonna be ready to go pretty quickly, I think. Like I said, Cody, I think, is interesting too. It's hard to pick. I would flip a coin between those two dudes if you're just going to continue adding on philosophy. I mean, I think Jacoby potentially is another guy that could work there for them. Jacoby Walter from Baylor. One of those 4 dudes, or McCain also fits in there too. So I think all 4 of those guys kind of fit there. But Carter, Walter, and Williams all kind of fit the physical sort of mold that we're talking about also. So
Go check out all of J. Kyle Mann's work at The Ringer. Listen to him on The Ringer Pod. Listen to him and watch him on YouTube. Always great stuff. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.